Welcome back to the Unfiltered Trainer. I am your host, Gina, aka Gina Marie Fit, and y'all, we have made it to episode 13. It's so crazy when you have an idea and then you have an action plan. But the crazy part is when you actually take action on your action plan and you get to see those efforts come to fruition. And it's really cool to see the progress, to see all of the updates, the downloads, the comments, the 5-star reviews. One, that's so important for podcasters. And two, it just lets me know that the content I am putting out resonates with you. It was so refreshing last week when I was out and about. Somebody had pulled me aside and said, "Oh my God, your podcast is like," she was like, "it's so good. I love everything you're putting out." And it just was like, "Oh, you listen?" Like, so you don't know. I've said this in a previous episode. It's interesting being on a podcast because I can see the downloads and it's amazing. And I'm so grateful for that so many people have downloaded this podcast, but I don't know what people think when they're listening to it. And so I am somebody that loves feedback. So constructive, if you have something to say, an episode you want to see, like I want this to be an interactive experience. And so if there's something you want me to address or a topic or a conversation, I am still working on the video aspect of this podcast. I actually today went and checked out a co-working space where I could film the podcast at. My only concern, if you saw that reel, is just video and audio, especially because my audio clearly is going into a mic and it's not just being filmed on an iPhone. I want it to match, and being the OCD little baddie that I am, I'm going to be so upset if it's not perfectly matching to the audio. I don't want it to be a different experience. And so I've been looking into podcast spaces to record the episodes where I want to interview people. It's like $350 an hour. And that just goes to show you how involved editing a podcast is. It takes a really long time. And then when you add in the video component, y'all, it's a struggle. So it's definitely in the works. I'm going to go to a couple more places before I solidify where I want to invest in. And then I want to make sure I'm supporting a local business to Tampa. So that's really important to me too. It's another means to give back and support your community. So that is my plan. Also, if you're staying in the loop of all things that I just continually keep pursuing, Sweating Together for a Cause officially went live on February 1st. So thank you to every single person that made last year's live event possible. It is what laid the groundwork and the foundation for people wanting to participate in this charity organization collaboration, whatever you want to call it. And I had another meeting today for what might end up being what was an annual event, turning into a biannual event. And so just waiting to hear back from the group I met with today. You know, they align with everything I'm doing, and we just got to make sure that the parameters fall in line with the calendar. And so stay tuned. We've got some cool details coming up when that all goes live. But we're going to talk about something, and it can be a hard conversation to talk about. I've titled this episode, "I'm Sorry You Feel That Way," which seems like such a simple sentence, but when in reality, it's so much more than that. And so I want to provide a trigger warning on today's episode because we are going to talk about gaslighting. And gaslighting, when spoken about, can cause a resurgence of emotions, experiences, and negative interactions. I want you to go into this episode knowing that the goal is to understand gaslighting with the desire to develop emotional intelligence and provide tangible tips and tools on how to navigate the next time you're in a situation when you are being gaslighted. And so I know this has become a very, very popular term in the last 4 to 6, I feel like almost 8 years. I've been really consistently hearing more about it. So if you're not quite sure, like I wasn't in the beginning, years ago when I first heard that term, it's a form of manipulation and psychological control. And it's when you are fed false information or falsified narratives to make you question what you know to be true about yourself or a situation. And this leads to a lot of self-doubt, questionable perceptions, and can actually alter your mental health and sanity. One of the most common forms of gaslighting is when people attempt to shift the blame to another person to avoid accountability, aka deflection. Those who gaslight blame the victim for interactions and actions. And as a result, they will literally project their circumstances, situations, struggles onto the victim. And then as a result, that will have that person questioning their belief system, the validity in their experiences. It truly is like manipulation and psychological interaction at its finest. And so I have dealt with this in a corporate sense a lot. It's really difficult to be a woman, let alone a woman in business, because I feel like as a woman, especially in a leadership role, you have to perform 10 times the amount of others to prove yourself. And I feel like a lot of times women are seen as emotional in a negative sense. And so a lot of times there is deflection and people will make you feel in the leadership and in management and corporations that that's not the actual truth. That's not what happened. You hear that a lot in situations of harassment and sexual harassment. I remember when I was actually attacked by a patient in their home several years ago, and it was a really, really messed up thing I experienced. What we learned were they were drunk that visit, and I had seen them at 8:30 in the morning. So like lay the story here. And this person was getting very aggressive with their verbiage, and he kept making like inappropriate comments, and it escalated to the point that he went to assault me, and he went to like lunge at me to attack me, and I darted off to the opposite side, grabbed my bag, and walked out the door. And the part that was most alarming for me was the fact of how my management handled the situation. And they told me that as an intelligent young female, that I should prepare myself for interactions like this because this is bound to happen. And I just have to get used to it pretty much. That's what they said to me. And I remember just standing in this office and I felt like I did something wrong. I felt like I caused that interaction and I was somehow in the wrong for being who I was, just being myself. It made me feel like instead of being a victim in a situation, I was the one at fault. And that is when I first started to understand what gaslighting was. Obviously, if you've been in toxic relationships or friendships or toxic work environments, I endured a lot of gaslighting last year. It's something, if you really start to think about your actions and situations, you may wonder, how do you know if you're being gaslit, or how do you know if you're having like a miscommunication? Because I will put a disclaimer on this and say that there are times when people just miscommunicate, or if they're struggling to get their point across, or they have an ill choice of words. It's not necessarily they're trying to manipulate you. Sometimes things get lost in translation. They truly do. After we finish this episode, you will know if something's lost in translation or if you are being in a gaslighting situation, because there are 10 main signs of gaslighting behavior that we're going to break down first that will really help you set the tone and look at the circumstances and relationships in your life to see and decipher the difference between the two. And so the first one that is most common, and I've experienced this in relationships, is blatant lying. Like, you know, the person is lying and they often lie with ease, which causes you to develop self-doubt and you start questioning everything. I endured this in a relationship when I was getting cheated on. I knew they were cheating on me, and I was like obviously traveling at the time for work, so I wasn't around. I knew they were cheating on me, and the way they would manipulate the situation and turn it into I was insecure, I didn't trust them. Like, I literally thought I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I was like, oh my God, this person loves me. How could I believe these things? Like, what is wrong with me? Oh my God, young Gina, if we could just like go back 10 years and just like shake the poor girl. She was so naive, so sweet, so innocent, just like wanted to believe the best of everybody. But I was being gaslit. And that person was cheating. And then they married the person they cheated on me with. And it was just like, wow, that really was happening, but they were so convincing that they had me truly believing these blatant lies that just kept developing into these like very outlandish situations that I was like, man, that does not add up. In my head, I'm like, red flag, but you keep going back because you think you love somebody. And as we go through these top 10 topics, you're going to see how, Gina, how could you be so stupid? No, of course. Like, of course you stay because of the tactics of narcissistic gaslighting people. They use these tactics so well that they keep reeling you back in. The second one is denial. Constantly denying what they said. You know what they said, and they will deny it, making you question your memory, which makes you question your sanity. You will literally, they could say like the sky is black, and you could look at the clock and be like, all right, February 5th, 3:51 p.m. They said the sky is black. You say, hey, you said the sky is black, and they're going to be like, no, I didn't. And they're so convincing with their verbiage that they will really make you think that that's not what they said. It's like the most mind-blowing situation. Another one is using the love against you. And this is what I experienced. Manipulation tactics causing a person to question what they hold close to them is one of the biggest ways you can gaslight somebody. So in this situation, like using a circumstance when you are in love with somebody to manipulate you, to make you question your relationship, your belief system, what's really happening in your relationship. Another easy way is something I experienced at a job is when your job manipulates you and uses it against you and finds issues with it. And so I endured a situation where I was being made to like be the one in the wrong. And as a result, people used that scenario of knowing how invested I was in that job against me. And they really were telling a narrative that was false and it was not true. And it ended up turning into a much larger issue. And it was so upsetting because here you are using something that I've invested like so much time in. I truly loved what I was doing at the time. And it turned out to be this very negative, ugly thing. And using that against me was such an easy way to gaslight me because I would go home crying from work thinking like, what is wrong with me? Why am I like this? You know, how did I become this kind of person? You know, I would just bawl my eyes out thinking that I really was the problem when in reality, it was just the circumstances and the situation. The next one is losing your sense of self. This happens over a period of time. And this happened in my relationship where the victim truly becomes a different person. You lack self-confidence. It truly just dissolves. You become a shadow of your former self. And when that relationship ended, I truly was devastated because I didn't know left from right anymore. We were known as this unit, and I would go to the grocery store and people would still ask about him. It was like I no longer had an identity, that who I was wrapped up in this person. And this is how people that are gaslighters, narcissists, manipulators get you, is because they create this sense of need that you are dependent on them, that you cannot function without them, that you have to have that person. And as a result, you will tolerate any form of behavior from this person just so that you still have them in your life. Another way people can gaslight is when they use your words versus actions. And what that means is they will talk to convince a person of their concern for them, and then their actions won't reflect those words. And what I mean is they will tell you you are the sun, the moon, and the stars, but their actions don't reflect what they're telling you. And so they will convince you that they love you, but then they do things that harm you and hurt you, which gives you this weird roller coaster of this up and down, which transitions us into love and flattery. This is something that is used in a lot of relationships, even friendships. You tear a person down and you build them back up just enough, and then you tear them back down again, and then you build them up just enough, and then you tear them back down again. Because that person, what they're doing is gaslighting, but they make it seem like it isn't all that bad. So when you're going through these situations and these scenarios, and you can deal with this at work, you could have a boss that tears you down and then like does something nice for you and then tears you down and then like shouts you out in like a Slack channel or like a communication channel. And it really makes you feel like you are all over the place on a roller coaster because you think they are supporting you, but then they pull you back. And that's just their way of truly like keeping a hand on you and holding you down from being able to grow and stand up from yourself, because they are able to manipulate you. Another one, and this one's very interesting, is confusion. Intentional confusion, meaning that a person will be desperate for clarity as they continue on this path of clarification of the cycle they're experiencing. And so they are desperate, trying to get clarification on what they've experienced, what they're going through. And then they will be confused because the gaslighter isn't intentionally going to confuse them. And so you're sharing one narrative, you're sharing one experience, and then they're intentionally trying to confuse you so that you're not able to see the manipulation tactics that they're utilizing. It really will make you feel like you're going to crazy town because you don't know what's right and what's wrong anymore the way they utilize that technique. Another one is projecting, which is something I've experienced in a business standpoint with a business partnership. And it's when they project their own issues onto others. And as a result, that person will feel the constant need to defend themselves for what they have not done. And so I've experienced this where somebody is projecting their own insecurities and issues onto you, and then that puts you in a situation of defense. You feel like you have to defend yourself when in reality, you did nothing from the beginning. They're just manipulating a situation because of their own insecurities, and then they put those, like the things that they perceive, onto you. And then by default, you're a human being, so you feel like you have to defend yourself. And then it goes into this vicious cycle because you're not the one that had the issue, but then you were forced to deal with this interaction. And so that can be really tricky in professional situations when you don't align with your coworkers or the team you're working on, is how to keep that line of communication open but professional. Another one is when they will have you questioning your own mental health. And this is really sad because somebody that already has a compromised mental health system and they engage in a narcissist relationship or a gaslighting relationship, the progression when somebody is questioning their own sanity will continue because that gaslighter is going to capitalize on that confusion, that vulnerability, and it will prevent a person from being able to seek the help they need because the manipulator will have them thinking that they won't be believed. And you see this a lot in domestic situations, and this is what's really sad, is that people don't want to speak up when they are in a domestic situation because that person has them perceived to believe that no one's going to believe them and that they're crazy and that something's wrong with them and that they somehow deserve that level of abuse, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or all three. And as a result, that person will prevent themselves from speaking up, or they'll be too fearful to go and get help because that person has threatened them. Gaslighting can become extremely toxic when in the wrong hands of the wrong person, and it can truly become dangerous. Lastly, everyone else is a liar or they're wrong, and everybody is against them. Since everybody's lying, it blurs the reality. If you've ever been in a relationship, and we've all been there, where we're not in healthy relationships, friendships, relationships, and your friends are trying to help you see the light at the end of the tunnel. That person you're in that situationship or negative relationship with will tell you, well, your friends don't like me, your family doesn't like me, they don't support us, they don't want us to be together. Y'all, if the people that love you are trying to have you abstain from an interaction, there's a reason for it. Yes, I know people try to manipulate things. Yes, you've got those very controlling parents who can't let their kids grow up. But if it's your hardcore group of friends that you know you've got their back, they've got your back, and they are telling you point blank that there's a situation that does not serve you, take it and utilize it as a resource, because the person that you're with that's the toxic one is going to tell you that no one wants you together, or they're just lying, or everybody hates them, blah, 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 blah. Any person like that that's deflecting a behavior like that and is utilizing this frequency and increasingly lying more and more, or attempting to prove to you, I should say, that the people around you don't support you and they're the only one that supports you, y'all run for the hills. run for the hills so fast because they are intentionally trying to isolate you, and that can lead to a lot more than just a conversation with a falsified narrative. Now, let's transition into the 4 most common types of gaslighting that you're going to see in a regular everyday, whether it's a work environment or a relationship. The first one, as we were just talking about, lying, is outright lying. So the purpose of lying here is to hide bad behaviors from the person they are interacting with. Lies equate to feelings of mistrust and doubt. The lies become bolder. The frequency increases. You've got a lot of people that will be like, oh, they're just jealous of us. They're just jealous of me. They don't love you like I love you. This is a very toxic thing that you see in a lot of relationships, unfortunately, and it's one of the most common ones you're going to see. The second one is scapegoating, and it's assigning blame to somebody else. And I've been through this, and I'm sure you guys can tell a million scenarios too, where somebody assigned the blame to you, meaning they did something wrong. You called them out on their, less than desirable interaction. And as a result, they place the blame as if you're the one that was in the wrong to begin with. And this is one of those times when you feel like you're on the hamster wheel because you're going back and forth. And every person obviously wants to defend themselves within a certain range, because if you know you're not in the wrong and you have a falsified narrative being assigned to your name, of course you want to clear your name and explain yourself. But you got to be careful here, because people who scapegoat other people tend to be the kind of people that want the last word too. And because of their own insecurities and issues, they can really escalate this situation. So you have to be careful and tread lightly with your responses here, because they are going to continually respond until you either block them or ignore them, because they will be the type that will keep messaging you until they get the last word. The third type is coercion. And this one is very interesting in a not good, very honestly negative way. They charm you to convince you that they're caring, that they aren't emotionally manipulative, that they have or use something that's important and close to your heart as ammunition to deteriorate you. And this is one of those terms where in domestic situation turns violent. I have seen this in elder abuse with patients. Families will manipulate situations and obviously emotionally manipulative situations where they will threaten or honestly verbally abuse someone. I've seen it where, toxic families have threatened to keep their family member in a nursing home if they don't do XYZ, or we have been through situations of financial abuse with elders where families have manipulated situations for their families to sign off money and left them with nothing. I could tell you stories that just blow your mind, and it's just so sad because those who are at the aging population are so vulnerable. And at that, when you age throughout life, you have less and less people in your life, so you really cling to those people. So it's easy to fall to coercion. The fourth most common type is manipulation of reality, and that means constantly denying somebody's experience, doubting their judgment, doubting their memory of events, eroding their self-esteem, ruining their mental well-being. Even if you have physical proof, they will convince you to doubt yourself. And they'll say things like, you were wrong, you never remember things correctly. And this happens a lot with elders, and it's really sad because of dementia. Alzheimer's is so prevalent in that environment. Families will use that as a means to manipulate their family member to get what they want. And it's really messed up, but it happens far more than people realize. Now, let's transition, because you guys know no matter what topic we're talking about, I always want there to be a positive, a tangible topic or resource that you can utilize to work through and navigate the circumstances in your life. And so what do you do? Like, how do you respond to gaslighting phrases? And so the key is to not feed the narcissist. It's important to learn and identify their behavior so you can recognize it and respond with a clear head. Instead of arguing, disengage from the conversation with calm responses and walk away when necessary. This is something that I've had to do where you realize the conversation is going nowhere or it's escalating, honestly, and you don't want to be involved. So these are sometimes where you have to just stop responding, leave the message unread, or sadly block people. You're not dealing with rational behavior at this point. So you have to remember that if you are in a rational state, you're trying to be calm, respectable, you're just trying to get your point across. You may not necessarily be dealing with a rational person. So you have to decide to draw that line in that sand when you have to move forward. And that sadly means that you may not have closure in that situation. Gaslighting is essential for narcissists because they create a narrative of that something occurred that makes them look good and you look bad. And I have been through this and it's mind-blowing to me. They will maintain this narrative and make statements that you are misremembering something, that something has gone wrong, or you are experiencing some sort of mental or emotional crisis. I experienced this in a work environment where I was made to have people pitted against me, and it made you look bad when in reality, you know your truth and that's not the right narrative. But if you convince enough people to respond and follow along, you can create a falsified narrative that is believed to be true that isn't necessarily the truth. And that's what causes a complete mental or emotional crisis. When I was going through this, I was having panic attacks at the time, like anxiety attacks, because I truly really thought that like I was losing it, and that if this outcome was what it was and it was people that I knew causing this outcome, I didn't know how to move forward, and I didn't know how to, what I thought was fix myself. And so the reality is, in life, you're just going to be faced with a variety of people, and your intentions might be good and theirs might not, and vice versa. And you just have to learn how to adapt and work with different types of people and communication styles. And so things to say when you are being gaslighted, very simple statements that get the point across but are respectable, are, I realize you disagree with me and this is how I see it. That way, that gives them the affirmation they need that, okay, they heard what I had to say, but then you're going to speak on what's your truth. A second one is, I see that your perspective is different from mine. I'm not imagining things. And these are one of those scenarios where somebody is telling you that you perceive something wrong or you're telling a story wrong. When you know your truth, speak on it. Third one is, this is my experience and these are my emotions. And this is something that I am working on as a person. I've actually been listening to some podcasts. I am a Sagittarius, I call it, like a true Sagittarius. And so I ride, I'm fine, I'll give you a million chances, but when I'm done, I am done. And sadly, sometimes we are very quick with our tongue. And when we're in situations of, high stress or annoyance, I have learned that I just have to walk away. I've had to do this with family, with friends. Sometimes I just have to walk away, because if I speak on that topic immediately, it's going to be bad. And I may not mean it, but it is just Sagittarius are just quick-witted people. And they're, like I said, they're quick with their tongue, and it's not always necessarily a good thing. And something I'm working through, I internalize a lot out of fear of hurting somebody's feelings. And so I really struggle in environments with people who are good at communicating, because if you hurt me, I just shut down. I just get quiet. I take it in. I work through it. I'm so afraid of making somebody feel bad that inadvertently you sometimes do make people feel bad, because you feel like you're tiptoeing in situations and circumstances. But sometimes I go through these internal battles and I just fight myself trying to figure out the story when I probably should just talk to the person. But the last thing I want to do is ever make somebody feel bad. And this is just because I've had a history with people that are gaslighting me. I'm still trying to work to normalize and understand situations and how to properly communicate while still reserving the right to not have to share more than I want to share. And so it's a fine line, I feel like, for a lot of people, but especially just my nature. I am truly just everything a Sagittarius is. Lastly is, when you are looking for a statement when you're being gaslighted to say that is so simple and you're just tired of the conversation, is to say, I want to figure things out for myself. And this is one where I'm just learning to walk away from situations. Sometimes you need to pull yourself out of a situation and not allow the conversations and the feelings of others to affect you. Because sometimes as you're trying to make really big life-altering decisions, whether it's a job or a relationship, being surrounded by so many strong opinionated people is not always a good thing, because you're trying to figure out your truth. Your truth does not have to be ingrained in what other people's belief system is. And so sometimes it's just simple that you tell somebody, I need to figure things out for myself, and take the time you need to figure them out. And then when you feel ready, have that conversation. You in no way, shape, or form have a timeline on your response to any interaction or engagement. And if people feel like there's a certain amount of time you should conduct yourself in, that's on them. Just because we choose to handle things one way does not make us right, nor does it make us wrong. We are all entitled to conduct ourselves in the way we see fit, that aligns with our personal goals, our morals. We all want to be proud of who we are and our interactions, and that means being able to conduct ourselves in a manner we can be proud of, and that doesn't have to align with the person you're interacting with, which can be hard in terms of dealing with narcissists and people who are gaslighting. All right, y'all, that was a lot in a short period of time. So let's break it down into some tangible steps, tips, and tools that you can utilize on how to respond and take back control. First and foremost, you always want to make sure the situation is what it is. You want to make sure that you are being gaslit. And I feel like we've really broken down how to decipher that, because sometimes it can just be a form of miscommunication. So you may need, number two, to just take some space from the situation. Take a step back, really assess what you're experiencing, what their tactic are. Is that really their intention? And if you feel like you're in a situation where you are being gaslit, it's important that you start to collect evidence. It's important that you really start to have an accurate response of the interaction in a timeline, because you are going to want to do the next thing, which is speak up on the behavior, because it does need to be addressed. If you just allow people to treat you in such a manner, they will continue to treat you that way. And so you want to be able to speak up on the behavior, and the easiest way to do that is in a concise, accurate manner. When you choose to speak up, next thing, you really want to make sure that you are confident in the version of your events, which is why you collect the evidence. When you're speaking up on it, you're concise. You don't need to elaborate on anything. You owe nobody nothing. But you want to be confident in your version of events, because they're going to try to manipulate you and throw it back on you. And you got to stay strong and speak your piece and know your truth, because it's going to be a wild roller coaster ride as you are having this conversation, if you choose to have this conversation. Next up, you got to focus on self-care. It is extremely exhausting when you deal with somebody that is gaslighting somebody, when you have an unfavorable experience or situation. So please take time to take care of yourself, because it will really exhaust you to a level that you need to seek rest and recovery. If you need to, involve others. And this had happened in a work situation, actually, where I had to involve a superior to address the situation so that the situation could end. And sometimes that's what you need to do. And when you come with receipts, there is no discussion with you. They have a discussion with the person that it needs to happen with. And lastly, you may need to seek professional help. And this is something that I really hope this year and from moving forward stops being so taboo. Therapy is so beneficial, and it's something that I'm actually considering myself right now. Having a traumatic brain injury is a lot harder than I want everybody to know. And with my recent neurological update visit, I most likely need to go through speech therapy, because my vocabulary isn't coming back and my words are backwards, and I say things and it's an impulsive nature, and I'm already impulsive. I'm a Sagittarius. I just go, if I have a thought, I just take action, but it's really hard to communicate when you are dealing with something that people can't see. And so one of the specialists had asked me, had I considered going to therapy, that they actually recommend therapy for brain injury patients because you may deal with PTSD, or you may have a difficult time communicating with your loved ones, or those you interact with because people can't see it and you want to be treated normal, but you're not the person you were before the accident. And so there's always an opportunity to learn and grow. And that is why I love therapy, because it's an unbiased opinion. We can always grow as people. I'm definitely this year seeking to grow as a leader and learn how to deal with a variety of personalities. And so I can better interact with people instead of just shutting down and internalizing all of the issues I'm experiencing. And so if you have been in a narcissistic relationship, you are used to dealing with gaslighting, you've been gaslit, it's great resources to seek therapy and learn how to grow and overcome those circumstances, because you may think because that person is no longer in your life that you are okay and you are somehow healed, but you're going to keep revisiting those scenarios. Life has a funny way of repeating scenarios until you learn the lesson. I always say the universe is going to continue to teach you that same lesson until you actually learn it. And so don't be afraid if you're in these situations, you've had toxic scenarios, family situations, relationships in your life, seek out help. That's why they're specialists. That's why, the best people understand the circumstances, because they've lived through it. And so it is something that I highly recommend to everybody, is when you're struggling, seek the help you need to overcome it and utilize it as a resource to be the next best version of yourself. And so I hope today was helpful. I hope it was informative. And as always, y'all, stay tuned and I will chat with you soon.